You guys, this is crazy. We beat Candace Owens to it, and I'm not going to beat around the bush right now. This is probably our biggest story yet. So over the weekend, Erika Kirk was just given a position with the U.S. military in leadership that will help oversee one of the most elite military academies in the country. So the obvious question is, why? Why Erika Kirk? Why now? And why is somebody with zero military background suddenly in an important leadership role connected to the oversight of future U.S. military leadership? Because the timing is strange. This just happened right as geopolitical tensions are rising. We're seeing more and more discussions about military readiness. They're suddenly reappearing in the national conversation. And the political rhetoric around the conflict is escalating almost daily. And at the same time, Donald Trump is facing growing political pressure while the United States and its allies are staring down a rapidly escalating situation involving Iran.
And we're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
And that context matters. Appointments inside structures connected to the U.S. military don't happen overnight. And they certainly don't tend to appear quietly during moments of intense, very intense geopolitical tension. Decisions about who sits inside institutions that shape future military leadership are normally very deliberate and highly visible, which is why this one immediately raises eyebrows. And we only noticed it because we have Erika Kirk alerts set up, and this was covered in a small outlet in Colorado. They picked up the story before any national press did. It barely registered anywhere else, not even on Twitter. But once you look at the role Erika Kirk has been placed into, and once you start connecting it to everything else happening right now, the situation becomes really interesting. And real quick, if you're new here, I'm Lauren Paritra. Willa Paritra is on the floor, and we're going to ask you to please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this are exactly the kind of thing that slip right through the cracks until someone starts pulling on the thread. And once you pull on this thread, it leads to a much bigger conversation. So make sure you're subscribed. Follow me across social channels. I am Lauren P. We're covering this every single day. So conversations about war, political promises, and institutions that shape the next generation of military leadership are a big deal. Because if you just rewind just a few months from the central message from Donald Trump and now J.D. Vance during their campaign, that they were going to market with messaging that America needed to avoid being dragged into another major conflict.
We're going to stop sending our young people to faraway lands. We are not the policemen of the world. We need to use our young people here at home.
They repeatedly warned that the country was heading straight towards new wars and argued that ordinary Americans would end up paying the price. One of the most emotionally powerful lines in that campaign was the idea that voters were choosing between endless foreign wars with Kamala and a government that would keep the country out of them. That message resonated with a lot of voters. Fast forward to today, and the tone of that conversation looks super different.
I think we have great support, and I think if we didn't do it first, they would have done it to Israel and give us a shot if that was possible. I have never had more compliments on something I did. We have a little high oil prices for a little while, but as soon as this ends, those prices are going to drop.
We have now tensions involving Iran, which have escalated rapidly. Analysts are now openly debating how far the situation could spiral, and suddenly Washington is talking about military readiness, again, in a way that we haven't heard in years. In my lifetime. And then the draft conversation started resurfacing.
Mothers out there are worried that we're going to have a draft, that they're going to see their sons get in and daughters get involved in this.
President Trump wisely does not remove options off of the table.
The United States hasn't had to use conscription in decades, but the moment the word draft even enters a conversation, it changes everything about how people hear everything connected to the military. And this is where the Erika Kirk story intersects with something we haven't really talked about before. Because if you can remember our previous coverage of Charlie Kirk, one of the things that stood out towards the end of his life was that he had become an outspoken critic of the idea of a war with Iran. He warned repeatedly about the consequences and made videos arguing that the United States should stay out of another Middle Eastern conflict.
Where Charlie Kirk called me, and guys, he was mad. He said, JD, I'm really worried
I'm really worried that what's going on in the Middle East right now is going to lead the United States into a protracted military conflict. I've never told anybody that Charlie was really worried about that in the final months of his life. I listened to him. And I really believe that one of the reasons why the President of the United States knocked out the Iranian nuclear facilities, but never got the United States into a protracted military conflict and never lost a single American in a Middle Eastern conflict is because Charlie Kirk reminded me of that.
Some of those clips here are honestly eerie to go back and watch now because he was essentially predicting the exact kind of escalation people are suddenly debating today. J.D. Vance said that Charlie Kirk was one of the people urging him to stay out of war. Now, we're obviously not setting foreign policy based on what a racist podcaster said before he got... That's not the point. The point is that Charlie Kirk was a major voice inside this movement that helped elect this administration, and he was publicly warning against exactly the kind of escalation people are suddenly talking about, which makes what happened this weekend even more interesting, because while the country is suddenly talking about war and escalations and military readiness and drafts, Erika Kirk has been placed into a role connected to the military. So what exactly is that role? Erika Kirk has been appointed to the United States Air Force Academy Board of Visitors, which oversees the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And this is where the story starts to get even weirder. The Air Force Academy isn't just another university, it's one of the few institutions responsible for training the next generation of officers for the U.S. Air Force and Space Force. Admission is extremely competitive. The academy operates as a pipeline for military leadership, and the people who graduate from it often go on to occupy some of the most important positions in the armed forces. The Board of Visitors exists to monitor how that institution operates. Okay, so it reviews morale, curriculum, academic programs, and institutional culture. And then it sends recommendations to the Secretary of Defense, or as Pete Kegsbreath likes to call himself, the Secretary of War, and the Secretary of Air Force. In other words, it sits inside the oversight structure surrounding one of the most important military training institutions in the United States. And Erika Kirk is now on that board, which brings us back to the question we started with, which is why Erika Kirk? Because when you start looking at the timelines around this appointment, the sequence of events is freaking weird. First, Charlie Kirk was appointed to the same board. Then he was at Utah Valley University. And then after his death, discussions began about honoring him with recognition from this academy. The question was ultimately referred to the Board of Visitors, and now his widow sits on that exact board. So the board that may have eventually weighed in on whether Charlie Kirk receives recognition from the academy now includes Charlie Kirk's widow. You don't need to invent a conspiracy for that timeline to feel really weird. You just start to lay out the sequence, and then we, the people, can process it. Some observers frame it through the lens of this: a broader political fight over military institutions. Over the last few years, there have been heated debates about ideology inside service academies. There have been a lot of curriculum changes, and the role about politics and officer training keeps coming up when a political figure or somebody closely tied to one appears inside the oversight structure of a military academy. People inevitably start asking whether it reflects a broader push for influence inside those institutions. Others interpret the move more symbolically. So Charlie Kirk was one of the most prominent conservative youth organizers in the country. His organization, Turning Point USA, Toilet Paper USA, spent years trying to shape political culture on college campuses, going straight for the youth. And they built a network of young alt-right activists. From that perspective, placing his widow into the role that he once had could be seen as a continuation, keeping his influence connected to the institutions he had just begun. And he got all this started and off the ground right before his... Is Erika Kirk being given this role as a memorial appointment, a political appointment, or something else? Those are the questions people are asking. There's also the simple fact that appointment appeared very quickly. The change showed up on the board's website with very little public explanation. When something connected to the oversight of a major military institution appears that way, it naturally raises questions out of curiosity. And then there's geographic oddity in this story. Charlie Kirk's life ended in Utah. And now the next chapter of this story unfolds inside the oversight structure of a military academy in Colorado. Why Colorado? Narratively, it's a strange path from a campus event at Utah Valley University to a seat on a board connected to one of the most selective military academies in the country. But the most significant angle may be simply the institutional one. The United States Air Force Academy is part of the pipeline that produces the leadership of the Air Force and Space Force. The Board of Visitors doesn't command troops or write military strategy, but it does influence recommendations about curriculum and culture and recognition within that institution, which is why appointments to that board carry symbolic weight and why people pay attention to somebody connected to one of those most visible, prominent figures in the country. So when they suddenly appear there, when we see Erika Kirk appear there, it's strange. And honestly, I'm not done digging into this one yet. I have a feeling there is a lot more to the story around why this particular academy. Why now? What exactly will this board be able to help shape in terms of curriculum and institutional direction? The timeline alone raises enough questions that it's worth looking at more closely. So what I'm going to ask you to do is make sure you are subscribed, because I am going to keep digging into this one. You can follow me across all social platforms too. I am Lauren P. Pretty much everywhere except for Twitter, where I'm still a Lauren Paritra there, my full name. Follow me there too. And we are going to break this down even further. So let me know what questions you have, what info you want to know, and I will see you in the next one.